Once again, like I said, once we bring groups together, like Father Pickard, we're not going to agree on all the issues, but when we do agree on issues, and we all know, everybody here knows what's going on in those courtrooms is not right. When things are done in secret, when there's no cameras, when there's no oversight, it just breeds for what has happened. Here in Northeast Pennsylvania, right here in Luzerne County and Lackawanna County, we just had a sentencing yesterday of Robert Miracle for Kids for Cash. Luzerne County, Kids for Cash. You hear it all the times, lawyers, judges, precedent. Precedent. Everything is precedent. Well, we have precedent right here in River City. And what we do know, what's going on in the courts is not right. I want to bring up, and what we're going to do today, and we're going to welcome anybody that really wants to speak as possible. We have a number of people that want to talk to their issues, and we're going to be talking about specific issues. But certainly, we know that there's a number of people that are afraid to come to this rally because of the intimidation factors. We know that there's a number of lawyers and doctors and professional people that have not come forward only because of the fear factor. And if the spirit moves you, there's a number of people out there that I know are afraid. Come up. We'll sit here and we'll talk you through it if you want to. But right now I want to bring up Diane Gochin. She's going to talk a little bit about the intimidation factor and then a little bit about her case. And then she's going to introduce Andy Ostrowski, who is going to be running for Congress in the 11th district.
Thanks. I've met a lot of people here that I actually already know from the internet. It's nice to finally meet a lot of you. We're all kind of here by default, got involved in the system. I never expected to be doing any of this. I raised 3 kids, and the reason why I'm here is from a 20-year marriage that I filed for divorce, and 7 years later I've gotten absolutely nowhere. I have just about lost everything that I own through the courts. After finding out that my husband's attorney gave the judge a campaign contribution. I'm sure a lot of people have stories like that. There were no custody issues. It was a simple process. But the entire marital state was dissipated with the cooperation of the judge and the attorney. There's no doubt in my mind that they both know what's going on. When the lawyers see assets on either side, they play this game. They're not really representing you or the other side. What they're doing is playing a game of extortion to take your assets, and that is because of an hourly wage system that is a complete conflict with the justice system. There's no motivation for them ever to end a case. I haven't even gotten to equitable distribution. I can't get to the appeals process. All of your rights are being blocked by rules that have not been passed by the legislature. They've been passed by the Bar Association. The legislature passed statutes, and you can't get to that law because of the Bar Association, and that is really the root of the problem. It's an organization of county, state, and national associations that they get together, and it's become a major business. As a matter of fact, there was a movie out, Divorce Court, that stated that family court is a $50 billion a year industry. So it's going to take a lot to knock this down. There's a lot of money on their side. So when I started this, I thought, there has to be somebody to go to. Well, probably like a lot of you, I went to the FBI. Okay. I went to the FBI. A lot of you probably have. I went to the Pennsylvania Attorney General. I went to the United States Attorney General. They did nothing. And I got really excited because I found the anti-corruption unit. But it wasn't their jurisdiction. So I went to the Philadelphia Attorney's Office. I went to all these different levels of government that are supposed to help you, and it wasn't anybody's jurisdiction because the courts are under nobody's thumb. And that is because of something in 1968. Well, actually probably started way before that, but what I found was in 1968 something called Article 5, Section 10C was amended under the Pennsylvania Constitution. And a lot of other states had the same amendment. And what it did was it was supposed to give the courts administrative rule. But the courts interpreted themselves to mean that they can completely rule the entire judicial system. So in 1978, the General Assembly noticed that they were getting out of control, and they challenged the courts. But the courts were already, it was the inmates running the asylum, and the courts decided, well, you know, we're not doing anything wrong. We have the right to make these rules. So from then on, it just spiraled out of control. And that is the same thing whether you have custody issues, you know, marital asset issues, false imprisonment. You can't get anywhere because there is no oversight to these courts at all. There's just nowhere to go. And as long as there's profit in it, these people are not going to act ethically or morally. And it's become like a ruling class. And one of the worst issues is immunity. I mean, the concept of judicial immunity comes from, you know, ancient, you know, archaic concept in England that the king can do no wrong. But as far as I know, there are no kings and queens in America, except for apparently these judges are acting in that manner. But I think that there is some hope, and the way to do this is to get somebody in Washington, D.C., because the federal government hasn't stepped in since the Civil Rights Movement. And this is really another Civil Rights Movement. It took Martin Luther King 30 years to get people out into the streets. I can imagine what he would have done with, you know, if he had the internet. But at this point, you know, we need somebody down in Washington, and that's, you know, that's why I'm here today. I'm with Andy Ostrowski, who's running for U.S. Congress. He was a civil rights lawyer, and I know that he will stay the course of introducing legislation for court reform. And it's the only way to do it, because this is not just a state issue, this is across the nation. I've met people, I was part of a group, and I met 1,000 people online across the nation that are all having this problem in states where their children are being stolen, their homes are being stolen, and the only way to do this is for the federal government to get involved. So I want to have Andy come up and talk, my good friend Andy Ostrowski.
Everybody hear me okay? All right. Thank you very much, Diane. That was a kind introduction, and Diane is one of the many courageous, intelligent, dedicated people who have suffered needlessly over the past number of years dealing with these very important issues in dealing with our justice system. And fundamentally, that's what this is all about. It's all about justice in America and how it's administered. We have a civil rights icon, Jessie Epps, here. Very pleased and honored, sir, to take this stage before you come up here today. I want to thank Lou Jasikoff for all the effort that he's put into this. I met Lou, and it's going to be a great opportunity for he and I to work with each other and get these messages out. There are some real fundamental problems with the way justice is administered in America, and one of the problems is that it's not covered by the media the way it should be. You know, we get you get the gay and lesbian marriage issue from the Supreme Court. I mean, these are important issues. They're important wide public policy issues, and you get abortion issues and things like that covered from time to time, but you don't get the suffering covered, and there's some structural, institutional reasons for that I'm going to talk a lot about. I'm not going to get into all the policy details of it today, but you get, you know, no one's going to talk about Bruce Levine and his family suffering, and nobody's going to talk about June Weiss and her suffering, and nobody's going to talk about Tara Koval and her suffering, and that's what we're going to talk about during this campaign. I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been in the civil rights practice for 20 years. For the past 4 years, I've developed something called the Pennsylvania Civil Rights Law Network. I've worked with Democrats, I've worked with Republicans, I've worked with Tea Partiers, I've worked with Occupy Wall Streeters, I've worked with libertarians, I've worked with people from the sovereign rights movement. And the sentiment that I'm hearing out there is all the same, that the system is broken, the government no longer works for us, and what's most pertinent for us today is that the courts no longer work for us. You don't go into these halls of justice anymore and get fair and equal access to justice. And again, there are a whole host of institutional reasons for these things, but you know, I'm not going to get into all the policy details. I'm going to talk about it a lot in my campaign, but we're going to talk today just generally about some of these themes and how it's affecting people. I have been standing with people and representing people as a civil rights lawyer. I'm a suspended civil rights lawyer right now, and there's a whole story to be told there. I'm a victim of the same system that a lot of these people are victims of, because I had the courage to stand up and the heart to stand up and to fight with them and try to find their justice in certain ways, and you become targets in this system. Some of the issues relate to the whole Article 5, Section 10 thing that Diane talked about, and there are things that we need to talk about there. But civil rights lawyers in particular are singled out for sanctions and for discipline more than other lawyers. And what's the result of this is that the individuals are suffering. These are not disgruntled litigants that came out here today because they're disappointed in a bad result that they got from the courts, or that their case got thrown out and they just think that it should have been a different result. This is happening across the country. There are millions of people in America that are being mistreated by their courts and abused by their courts. It's happening in the mortgage foreclosure industry. We have a situation where banks are coming into courts waiving fraudulent documents, missing documents, lost documents, and judges are going with the bankers' lawyers, denying people their right to hearings, throwing them out of their houses, and with no evidence, no due process whatsoever. This year, what a year to be running for Congress and then being a civil rights lawyer. It is 50 years this year since the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and Mr. Epps knows how hard that fight was to get. And I have a lot of personal experience in fighting under the Civil Rights Act in 1964. But the fact is, we're here 50 years later, and we're still not getting justice. Bigotry is still an issue in this society. Whistleblowers are getting retaliated against and abused. Everybody's getting abused, and we don't need more laws. We don't need a new Civil Rights Act. We don't need a whole host of new laws. We need the laws that are on the books enforced. And the reason that these things aren't advancing is because the courts aren't doing their jobs. And that's the fundamental problem with what's going on in this recent climate. To the mortgage foreclosure industry, it's the banks who get the bailout, and the individual who's working 2 jobs to pay a second mortgage that gets the eviction notice. The civil rights issue that has become the issue for the 21st century is due process. What we are talking about here today is we're talking about fundamental across-the-board deprivations and denials of due process. It does not know skin color, it does not know nationality, it does not know anything, but that's what's happening. Every time you walk into a court and you walk out without a hearing, and you walk out without a transcript, and the judge ignores evidence, that's a due process of law issue. And this is the way we're going to start looking at these issues and focusing on these issues. The issues also have existed, and what really inspired this rally today was the family court issues and the suffering that goes on, the families that are hurt, the children. You okay? Okay. Children who are hurt. I'm reading the stories on people's Facebooks and messages that they send me about mothers going to bed listening to their children crying at night because of the way a court treated them in court that day. This is affecting our society. It's affecting people at very deep levels, and it's very tragic and very sad. And I'm going to go a little bit out of the way and suggest to everybody here that all of you people in this family court system who are hurt, I've been talking to probably 15 or 20 of you today, get together and organize a class. I'm a suspended civil rights lawyer, and I can get in trouble for saying this, but I will help you. I will help you organize a class action lawsuit where you sue this whole system. Go into federal court and make these federal courts, right across the street is a federal courthouse, make the federal courts step in and do their jobs. My experience has been through the federal courts.
Excuse me, sir, aren't you worried about the Koch brothers burying you in money?
Well, we'll get to, I'd love to comment that at some point, but let me just finish my comments. We'll keep it pertinent to what we're talking about today, but talk to me afterwards.
I love your speech, but
Great.
the fact is, the Republicans are just going to bury you in money.
Well, I'll comment on that at the end, but let me comment on that right now. Here's what I want to do. I'm running for Congress in the 11th Congressional District. It is the home of the Kids for Cash scandal right down the road in Luzerne County. That was an international shame and embarrassment brought on the state of Pennsylvania. There were 2 judges that went in jail, 2 judges that got convicted, and thank God they're off the bench and they're in jail. But we cannot let that issue die there. There are institutional, structural reasons that happened the way it happened. There were lawyers sitting in those courtrooms when children were sentenced without lawyers, and no lawyers spoke up. And this thing went on for years. So let's not stop talking about these issues. Let's keep talking about these issues. And the way we're going to talk about it, sir, that commented on the Koch brothers, is we are going to make the 11th Congressional District the Judicial Corruption District. For the first time in the history of this country, a congressman is going to talk about how individuals are heard through the courts. Someone is going to go to a legislator, and the legislator is not going to say, well, I can't help you because that's a matter from the courts. I am going to have the federal courthouse and the Lackawanna courthouse on speed dial when I'm in Congress. And I'm going to pick up the phone and say, hey, you're denying my constituents due process. Change it. Do something different for these people. And that's how we're going to do this. And we need, sir, wherever that gentleman went, we need to do this on a grassroots basis. I need help. I need people who are going to pick up the phone and make calls, who are going to knock on doors and say, we got a new message, we got a new candidate, and that's going to be me. I want to read a comment. My friend Gene Rona sent me a quote that I'm going to be using and then talking about all the time. It comes from, it's 1821 from Thomas Jefferson. He said, the germ of destruction of our nation is in the power of the judiciary, an irresponsible body, working like gravity by night and by day, gaining a little today and a little tomorrow, and advancing its noiseless step like a thief over the field of jurisdiction, until all shall render powerless the checks of one branch over the other, and will become as venal and oppressive as the government from which we separated. That's what I'm talking about. That's what we're here today about. That's what's happening, and this is what I'm going to continue to talk about. We are not living in our just world because our courts are not fairly administering justice. It is why banks and corporations and their big law firms have the playing field tilted in their favor. And the little guy gets nothing in this system. This was the sentiment behind the Occupy Wall Street movement. This is the sentiment behind the civil rights movement. We need the power in the people. We need to give government back to the people. And that's why I'm going to be the first candidate in Pennsylvania, one of the first in the country. There might be 2 fellows out in California who've done it. I'm going to take a pledge, a written pledge, to eradicate judicial abuse and corruption. It's going to say, if elected to the office of United States Congressman, I pledge to eradicate judicial abuse and corruption, ensure judicial integrity, and restore our rights to access to the courts, due process, and a fair trial as required under the rule of law. I will sponsor and support all legislation, executive orders, and all remedies at the local, state, and federal levels to achieve these results for my constituents. If we want to take back our government, and that's what we need to do, that's why people are upset in this world today, that's the sentiment that is out there, then we need to act at a deeper level. We need to divorce ourselves from the 30-second soundbite and understand these things at a little bit deeper level. It's going to require people to, come out of their apathy and come out and learn and hold on to your liberty and your justice. So that's the campaign I'm going to be running. I'm going to be reaching out to people and trying to educate them on a deeper level. And it's something that is not, I'll have the Koch brothers money out there and Lou Barletta's Republican money out there, but it's not going to intimidate me, it's not going to discourage me, it's not going to stop us. We are going to continue with this movement. People are going to organize. This is our first rally that we're having today. We're going to do this again. We're going to do this repeatedly through this campaign. My platform is courthouse steps. My issue is justice, and these are the things we're going to fight for. There are some underlying issues in this country that we're not reaching, and it's time that we turn it around. It's time that the electorate take control of our democracy. It's time that due process be given meaning again. With the grace of God, I'll serve as your next congressman, and I thank you very much.
All right. We're with you.
Okay. Andy, thank you.